Let me take you to Mumbai. Mumbai is a city with 12 million residents, half of which live in slums and on sidewalks next to roads. People have been migrating into the city of Mumbai over the last 100 years, but it's only recently that this issue is becoming more and more concerning. The city is becoming saturated with people, and so in 1985, the Bombay High Court ordered all pavement dwellers, that are people living on the streets of Mumbai, to leave the city. Shacks on pavements and on sidewalks were demolished, households were destroyed, children were left scattered on the streets, household belongings were stolen. And so to protest this, communities came on the streets and started to say that the government couldn't do this. The government had no right to make so many people homeless. And yet it continued. The government doesn't stop, especially not in India. And so thousands continued to be left homeless until a brilliant young man with the name of Jockin Arputham came along, and he decided to take a different, non-violent approach. He realized the issue was something much deeper than the demolition of these houses. It was actually that the pavement dwellers, or the people that lived on the streets, had no money to buy land. The sidewalks really did belong to the government, and so in a sense, they were right. They were right to remove these people off the streets. So then he approached these community members, and then he asked them, you should start saving money now, because if you had saved money, you could have saved your houses today. Everybody said, well, we have no money, what would we save? But he very cleverly then asked them to remove a rupee 1 coin from their pockets and said, now save that amount of change every day. He then said, now go to the government and demand the demolition. Say that you want these households to be removed as well. You don't want to live on the streets either. But then you're saving money, so give an alternative to us. All of these community members then went to the government and then demanded the demolition. This was the first time that community members had actually complied with the government. And in fact, that made them listen. We live in a time when going against the government is so common that they're used to it. It happens every day. It's all the time. And so to really make them listen, we need to show them that we understand their perspective and then show them our story. These community members went to the government and said, well, we know why you want to remove us from the streets, and we'll support you in that. But then also understand that Mumbai has been our home for the last 100 years. If you tell us to leave, where do we go? The government had no response, and they stopped the demolitions. The success of the story spread like wildfire across the city of Mumbai and then across the country, and then now to 35 countries around the world. This is how Mahila Milan was born. These are groups of incredibly powerful women that work in slum communities around the world. I tell you this story because I've been fortunate to have worked with some of these incredible women on the ground. I first went to the Dharavi slums in Mumbai in 2011 to conduct research on a public toilet project. Through my research, I came across numerous stories of how much toilets really meant to these people. It was so much more than just a place to relieve oneself. It was a symbol of dignity. It was a symbol of security. Having a toilet meant that a woman did not have to wake up at 4 a.m. and go with a group of women to an open defecation site far away just to prevent sexual assault. I heard such compelling stories and saw such dire sights that I really wanted to scream to somebody, to make anybody listen to the sufferings of these women and understand how is it that a woman was being molested or sexually assaulted on the way to a toilet and nobody said anything? How is it that a woman could be beaten by her alcoholic husband for 40 years, to whom she was married when she was only 14, and nobody said anything? How is it that slum residents were so invisible to the government? This was activist energy building up in me, and I was fuming. Mahatma Gandhi once said, sanitation is more important than political freedom. And he said this because to have a toilet means to have individual freedom. He said this because it means that a woman can walk to a public toilet without being taunted by men on the way, and so she has a pill that constipates her. Yet, the sad reality today is that 600 million Indians do not have a toilet. And so what do people do? They started protesting against this. They started to say, well, the government should provide us with funding so that we can get toilets. And in this very instance, the government really did provide them with funding. But the structure of the government funding is that it comes from the central government, goes to the state government, then the district government, the sub-district government, the village government, and then the people, if it ever gets to them. And even when it does, it's only a small fraction of the original, and it could take years for it to come. And so what do people do now? Do they start protesting again that, well, we didn't get what we had asked for? Or do they now start taking matters up in their own hands? You see, these Mahila Milan women, they realize that activist energy is a spiral. One can get trapped in it very easily. And so they decided to move a way out. They decided that now they were going to contract local public toilets, employ local labor to run and maintain those toilets when they realized the government was not going to be doing this anytime soon. From collecting savings to running local police stations even, and contracting large-scale toilets and million-dollar construction projects, these women have been running, bettering, and empowering their communities daily. They were able to do this because of a collective energy that they had created. And that's the energy I'm talking about. So how do we cleverly convert activist energy to a form of governance? After working for 4 years with local governments and communities now, I realized that the traditional methods of simply holding community meetings and going house to house doing surveys and interviews, that's not working anymore. People are too used to this, especially in the emerging markets. So we need more innovative approaches now to get people's attention, to make people listen. So what do? Create a current. Shock people with something that they don't anticipate. For me, I was walking into a men's public toilet in the Dharavi slums and just investigating the toilets, asking men who went in and out of the toilets questions. They were surprised. A crowd of men and women started to surround me. And I tell you this, in 5 minutes, I had a focus group discussion. And once you've got people's attention, that's when you share your message. I had gone there to talk about how communities could run their toilets much better than any government agency could. And people were genuinely interested. In another instance, however, I struggled really hard to get people on board. I was in a village in Western India and Maharashtra where I was trying to get people who had never used toilets before to not only construct but also use those toilets. This was an indigenous population that they had only constructed their houses, their cement houses 10 years earlier. So for them to use and construct toilets was a big deal. And so I knew this was an enormous task. But I took it on, and I decided to hold community meetings with men and women and children, created a sanitation council, worked with the village government and leaders. And yet, the turnout in the meetings was this. People didn't show up. And those that did weren't interested. And so I knew I was doing something wrong. I had to do something differently. I needed to understand my community members a little bit better. And so I did that. What was it that I could offer to them, other than money, of course, that could excite them as much and that could get them to listen? I realized for these people in this village, it was city life. They were enamored by going to a big temple in a big city. And so I announced a field trip to Mumbai, where we would go and visit the Siddhivinayak temple. That's a big temple in the city. And right before the visit, I announced a meeting to discuss sanitation barriers. How boring. And yet everybody showed up. This was the first time I was able to get the community members to even discuss their needs. Why was it that they didn't want toilets? How could we possibly help them with that? And then, in our field trip, not only did we visit the temple, but we also visited different models of toilets in the slums, in the buildings. Women from the slums spoke to the women from the villages about their experiences with toilets and how toilets had changed their lives. How it was not embarrassing anymore to walk long distances to a toilet so that men would count the number of times they visited a toilet every day. They felt secure having a toilet in their house. This teared up the women in the villages now. When we went back into the village, this was the turnout. Women now were at the forefront of this campaign to get toilets. By the time I left, there were 4 toilets constructed, and now there are over 10. So I urge you to not fall into this trap of activist energy and activism, but also suggest solutions, not just point at problems. Because energy is the strength of communities to come together and empower themselves. It is energy that allows a woman like her to break her silence in a country in demand for justice where there is none. It is energy that allows someone to fervently and passionately tackle their issues that they most care about. And so if you have to go home with any message, let it be this. Let the community take responsibility. Your problems cannot be addressed by anyone else. But what someone can give to you is the energy to do something about it. Thank you.